Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Fallen Angels TV here on Blog Talk Radio, and I thank all of you for taking the time to join us this evening. I'm greatly honored to have as guests, special guest this evening, Jeffrey Grupp. Jeffrey, are you there, brother?
I am. Great to be on with you tonight.
Oh, man, it's such an honor to share time and space with you. It's been a long time coming. We've been trying to hook up for several months now, and so I'm really excited that the show has come together and that you've got the time and that we're able to share this discussion. And we'll also, for the listening audience, we'll be doing a follow up next Friday, same time, same place. And so, well, brother, if you would please share your website information, contact, where people can go to find and support your work, and kind of a quick summary of what you've been up to lately. I know you're a very, very busy person.
Oh, yeah. I have two websites. My Flat Earth website is Zeteticism.com. That's kind of hard to spell, so it's got another name, firmamentofpower.net. You can go to that and you get to the same place. And that's got all my flat Earth work I did, mainly which was in a lot of 2015 and a little bit in 2016. I haven't put up I've been working on flat Earth, but I haven't put up as many videos lately just because I'll get to that in a minute. I've been doing something else. But all my videos are up there, and I hope that'll just be an ongoing project for hopefully much of my life from this point on. And when I get a chance, I'll be I've got a series up there. It's called Zeteticism. There's volume 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I want to redo number 2. That's the one where I introduced the idea of sundogs being a reflection of the moon or sun. So moon dogs being a reflection of the moon, and sundogs being a reflection of the back of the sun off the dome. You can, I don't know. I just thought that was one of the more amazing things I've ever seen in my life. We can get into that more in a little bit, but
Absolutely.
There's all those videos up there, and then some of the other ones I've done. Then my other website is I'm also become a pastor in the last that started this year. I've been studying in seminary for a while, and I formally became a pastor in a church in the Arminian Wesleyan tradition this year. In April it started, and that's really what I've been focusing on completely lately, just ministry. And that's the website I've been working on a lot lately, and that is praiseandlove.net. Is that website, and that's got an associated YouTube channel on it also. You can link to it through my website there. And I put up some videos lately, just some theological analysis, and I've got some sermons that I'm going to start putting up as well. And it's just a lot of fun. But that's what I've been doing lately. Just everything's just focused on ministry. And I had somebody, an anti-flatter, was asking me before the show in some YouTube comments, do I talk about flat Earth in my new career here? And the answer is kind of yes and no. I mean, when it comes up, when I'm at church ministering, it's not about trying to convince people the Earth is flat. It's about salvation,
Right.
It's about intimacy with Christ. It's about surrendering our life to Him so we can have that fullness of joy that it talks about in Psalm 16:10. But when it comes up, like I was saying to you before the show, then if I were reading Isaiah 40:22 or something else, I mean, I'm going to point it out. Everybody knows at church that I'm a flat earther, but it's just not something that's talked about much. But it makes some people kind of uncomfortable. What are they going to do? Disagree with the Bible? I mean, it's plain as day. It says it all over the place, right in there.
Right.
So yeah, no. As far as I've been up to lately, and it's been a lot of fun, to be honest.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I know. You were going through and doing all your studies with seminary, so it's good to see that you've completed and have reached a.
I haven't completed. I finished the undergrad part, and now I'm in the master's degree.
Awesome.
And when that's done, I'm just going to keep going to PhD. And
good
I know
for you.
I know what a lot of people. I've had a lot of people say on my Zeteticism channel. What are you doing in seminary? Those are all controlled by Satan and so forth. Now, look, I'm not disagreeing. I hear you when people say that, but I mean, if we're on with Christ, we've got the eyes of Christ. Philippians 2:5 says we've got the mind of Christ if we're surrendered to Him. So I mean, we're going to see it, but I mean, I'm still going to go through the motions because if I get to the destination of being a lead pastor someday, I mean, I'll tear it up and I'll shake the system up, and
Absolutely.
so but I mean, I'm not disagreeing with people saying that there are definitely, you can see contamination in the big seminaries. So
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, myself, I graduated from Mercer University here in Georgia,
oh,
which is
mhm,
it's a Southern Bible Baptist Bible Belt college, and
mhm,
we went through a whole track called the Great Books, where we basically studied a lot of Christian literature and a lot of theology and philosophical works all throughout the different eras of history, and that was my whole course of study. And we had to write like three 5-page papers, one 10-page paper, and one 20-page paper for each class. But
mm,
it was doing all of that study and all of that research which kind of turned me on to re-examining the scriptures in a way that I
mhm,
never had prior, and that brought me to several of the understandings that I then wrote about in the different books that I published. So
mhm,
it was a blessing to to go through that course of study. And certainly, as you said, if you have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and the mind to understand, it's not that, even though a lot of that is tainted, you don't carry that with you because, again, you're like one of those that does have the eyes to see, and so you're
mhm,
helping others really to come to truth on certain things. Like both of us are have an understanding as far as the geocentric flat Earth cosmology, and
yeah.
share that wherever we can. But certainly, I think you're wise to not make that the focus, that you are the flat earth preacher or whatever,
I'd
Uh,
like to be honest, but
well,
it's just
yeah,
not
but
the
you
point
don't,
is salvation.
right. Yeah, and you don't want to force. All right, sorry everybody. I don't know exactly what had
You're right.
there was with Blog Talk, but we are reconnected now, and so we're bringing Jeffrey back on. And if you would, brother, just repeat about your books again and when you release them, and give a short bio of the different books that you released.
Oh, okay, yeah. Corporatism, the Secret Government of the New World Order was published in '07, and that's really just a general study, which it gets pretty nitty gritty though into the way the secret government that rules our world works. Now, I don't speculate what the secret government is. Is it aliens? Is it the Nephilim? Is it demons? If the demons are different from Nephilim, that is, and is it the Jews, Jewish leaders? I don't get any of that. I just focus on how there's some dark entity, and
Mm-hmm.
we can see all the signs of it all over the place, whether it's on a Lady Gaga video or something that's choreographed through 9/11 or whatever. That's the first book, and to be honest, I think that book has a lot of stuff that um, I'm not sure about this, but back when I wrote it, I knew that a lot of stuff in there hadn't been said before. There's a lot of new information. People may have started. I think I've seen some people making videos about some of that stuff in there.
What
They came
year
out.
did you release?
Oh, that was '07, and then the
Wow.
telescreen was sort of a part two to that book, just all about mind control and brainwashing. And it was actually a chapter in corporatism that I extracted out because it got so big. And then the third book I wrote was before I was a Christian. I was really into the law of attraction stuff, and that
Uh
was in
huh.
2009. I published Telementation, which is sort of it's it's a different slant on the law of attraction because when I was like I was saying a second ago before we had to reconnect, I used to be a Buddhist, really hardcore Buddhist, and from 1995 to 2006. And I would notice in my Buddhist work that when I was in my deepest states of meditation, if I would think about something, especially if I would feel something about reality, like if something was going to happen or something in the future, then it would all of a sudden happen. Or if I
Yeah.
wanted things
Uh
to be
huh.
arranged in a certain way, I would notice this incredible correlation where first something would be in mind and then it would be in reality. So I just knew that those correlations between mind and then to reality happened. So when the law of attraction got so popular and the secret came out, I decided to just publish. Really, I just had a bunch of notes from that time that I wrote out about how to do Buddhist meditation and how to channel it into sort of a law of attraction kind of scenario. And that was this book Telementation that I published, which I'm really not. I know that law of attraction telementation stuff works and it's real.
It's
I,
biblical. It's you
mhm.
reap what you sow,
Yeah,
and
Mark
then
10:24.
what you put your focus on, that's your prayer, and that's what helps to manifest and bring forth. And so, I think it's like an energetic law. It's not just something that is Buddhist or Christian or separate or New Age, but that's just the way that energy and the dynamics of it really work. That's the way that prayer works
Mhm.
on an energetic level, in my opinion. But
Well, what it means to be Christian is to be a little Christ. I mean, we mimic
hmm
the Creator. The Creator is a creator, so we're creators too, and we have the
yeah,
same, to a smaller degree. We have the same. Our life mimics us. We're in His image. So I mean, there's no surprise, but it's just not something I'm so. I am interested in the telementational information, that book, but it's just not a. I mean, it's just sort of something I've kind of forgotten about because there's so many other things that have taken over. But I'm writing a new book now, which is called Ceaseless Prayer. And it says in 1 Thessalonians 5:17, it says there's a whole bunch, pretty much all over the Bible. It says that we're supposed to focus our mind in prayer on God all the time. I
yes,
mean,
yes.
in Psalm 105:4, seek His face continually. Ephesians 6:18 says to pray all the time. 1 Thessalonians 5:17, pray without ceasing. It's everywhere. I mean, Isaiah 26:3, fix your thoughts on the Lord all the time. I mean, I
hmm
could name 100 verses. So I mean, but the point is, whenever I've had pastors in seminary and at my church get mad at me because I really am I'm big into the whole ceaseless prayer, ceaseless faith, ceaseless
Absolutely.
repentance
Yes,
thing,
right on.
sort of like a monkish life. And I've had other pastors literally get mad at me saying, "You can't talk about that. It's impossible. Nobody does it." And I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's a completely non-biblical idea to shut that down. The point
Right.
is that people are distracted in the modern world with all their stupid
Yes.
TVs and everything,
Yes,
and they're
yes.
not their minds are off. So I'm
Yes.
writing a book on how does the mind, when our mind is discursive and distracted, and how do you get it to focus down into one point, which is called God, all the time. That's an art form, and that's what this. It's I don't know if it'll be out. It probably won't be out for a year or so, but I'm working on it pretty actively right now,
That
and it's
is awesome.
exciting.
That's
Yeah, yeah.
awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, because I tell people all the time that church is not somewhere we go, and prayer not something that we do. But for those that really truly understand the purpose behind prayer and also church, it's that it's a way of being. It's
Hmm.
something that you take into every moment, and it's a gratitude. It's a recognition of the sanctity of every moment, the blessing of every moment, and how we are not promised any more tomorrows or any more even the next moments, that at any time everything could end, because you just never know. But
Yep.
when you have that kind of a mindset, when you have that kind of an understanding, it makes life every moment the an entirely new dream. And it's like you're living almost, like the predators, that the way that they stalk the world and they walk through the world, they're completely aware of every moment, and they are, um, they see every detail of everything that is around them, and are completely aware, like a heightened awareness. And in my opinion, that's kind of that, because I learned that as well. Because
The
I was
spiritual war.
also, yeah, I was also involved in, like you, the New Age for a long time.
Hmm.
I was involved in shamanism and martial arts, and certainly martial arts teaches you that, how to bring your complete focus into every moment. Um, with
Hmm.
regard to the combat, sports and all that. But that is also it's a philosophy as far as a way of being, and that is prayer, living meditation. And I agree fully with you that for those that truly understand, that are true seekers, that are seeking the deeper aspects of the scriptures, and as far as Christ and what he exampled to all of us, that yeah, he was living prayer, he was walking prayer.
Hmm.
He was completely prayer in every moment, and that's the example.
Yeah,
Really.
that's yeah, beautiful stuff. Yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, I don't mean to say that Buddhism is bad in any way, but if you do Buddhism without Christ being number one,
Yes. Yeah.
you're gonna have the same thing happen to me, which is I just became demon possessed. I
Hmm.
became so messed up because I mean, Buddhism gave me such peace and it was such a beautiful thing and I loved it. But then I'd have all these problems. I'd go into massive depressions and all kinds of. I had all these problems. Then I finally figured it out that Buddhism was causing it, and I sort of toned way back on the Buddhism in like 2001, 2, 3, right in there when I kind of put it together. And then when I started doing conspiracy theory radio, I remember I had this such darkness in me, like especially in like 1999, 1997, in those times, which now I know is caused by. See, when you do Buddhism, it's essentially a surrender religion, a surrender philosophy, just like Christianity is a surrender philosophy. But with Buddhism, you surrender. Surrender means you give up and you let everything go. But see, with Buddhism, you let yourself go to nothing. And so all you are is you just make yourself an empty vessel that demons and the entities of the spiritual
Hmm.
world can just tear you apart, which is exactly what happened to me. See, but with Christianity, you surrender to Christ, and then you've got, just like Job, you've got that hedge of protection around you, and the
Hmm.
spiritual world can't touch you. Now, I know a lot of people out there are listening, like, oh, spiritual war, that's just a bunch of non-scientific mumbo jumbo. But that's fine if people think I'm not going to try to. But you mentioned shamanism. I mean, all somebody has to do is just, if you want to know if the spiritual war is real, just go do some
Hmm.
Buddhism without Christianity for a while, or maybe go eat some peyote like shamans do, and you'll see
Hmm.
loud and clear right away.
Right.
There
Right.
are
Yeah.
demons and spirits all over the
Right.
place.
Yeah, they're just waiting for you to open those doors. You know.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, because they see you opening those doors and they come right on in,
Yep.
and so yeah, and then the other thing with regard to Buddhism or Hinduism and some of these other Far Eastern religions is that the temples, they have all the idols, and the idols are completely
Yep.
demon
Demonic.
possessed. Yeah,
Hmm.
they're totally demonic, and
Yeah. When I mean Zen Buddhism, where they didn't have all that garbage. I mean,
yeah,
not
yeah.
more. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, where you're not associated to the different Buddhist temples or
Hmm.
uh, yeah, those places that have all of the idols. But yeah, I understand what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big issue with my life, trying to figure out where all this incredible darkness came from. Because I mean, it was the dark stuff. I mean, am I just a bad person? I remember thinking, but then there was a times then where when I was doing this is an amazing thing. Let me just tell this. This will just take a minute.
Hmm.
In
Sure.
1996, when I became a Buddhist, I became a Buddhist in '95, and I really kind of got it was this book called Zen and the Psychology of Transformation by Hubert Benoit, who Aldous Huxley, by the way, wrote the intro for. I didn't know the significance of that until later. But that book really sort of made me a proficient Buddhist, and man, I just hit it hard. I remember when I hit sort of some of those nirvanic states where you can just sense there's this gold omnipresent field everywhere of unfathomable happiness and ecstasy, just all over the place, and you could just tap right into that. I mean, I just got where I could do that, and there was this one day I purposely chose a job back then. I was in college getting an undergrad degree in philosophy and anthropology at the University of New Mexico. And this is after I transferred. I started off college at Michigan State studying astrophysics, and I transferred down to New Mexico. So I chose a job loading trucks in the middle of the night, so it was just completely peaceful and quiet, where I could do all my Buddhist work, while making a little bit of money. And there
Hmm.
was this one day where I was really in nirvanic state real heavily. It was great, and I remember thinking to myself, "What is this? What is this I feel? What is this I can?" You can't see it with your eyes; you see it with your mind's eye. It's sort of superimposed with the movie screen of physical reality. And I remember, what is it? When the books on Buddhism I'm reading say it's nirvana or satori or whatever word you want to put on, I'm like, no, that's not it. Is it? What is it? And you know what? I was an atheist back, a hardcore, strict atheist back then in my mid 20s. And I remember saying to myself while I was sitting there pondering this, is between the unloading of trucks and this factory job I had, I was just sitting in the back of the belt thinking about all this when I was in my Buddhist meditation. And I remember thinking, you know what this is? This is God. When the Bible, because I was raised as a Christian in the Reformed tradition, until I rejected it late in high school and became an atheist. And uh, I remember thinking, this is what the Christians call God, or Christ. And I remember, you know what I did then? I thought to myself, no, that can't be right because God doesn't exist, so I must be confused. And I kind of went through this battle in my mind for a whole morning. And man, I'm telling you, you know what happened after that? That's when the bottom fell out. So in other words, what God did is He showed me, without even going it through scripturally, He revealed to me, like the outskirts of Himself or something. I rejected it. And man, that's right then, from that point, that's when I started falling into the depressions. I started getting all the weird dreams, all the weird stuff started happening. It lasted for years. And that's because I rejected Christ. Conveniently revealed Himself to me. I rejected Him, and man, the bottom fell out, and the spiritual war just laid on me and tore me apart for years and caused me so many problems. Just so the thing about that's the story I don't talk about much because I'm afraid because people will think it's an anti-Christian story, because Buddhism really revealed God to me. Now that's made me think, and a lot of times, what does that mean about Buddhism? I mean, because you read about, especially in Zen Buddhism, you read about the monks. They're all crazy. There's all these stories in Zen Buddhism of Buddhist monks tearing each other apart, killing each other, beating each other up, acting like complete animals in Taoism and then later in Zen Buddhism. And I remember I used to love those stories back in this dark time I had because I could identify with it so much. And what's going on is these guys are opening themselves up to be a spiritual vessel with no protection because they're not worshiping the true God.
Right.
They're worshiping some fake idea of atheism because I don't know why Buddhists say they're atheists. It just doesn't make any sense. It's almost like you wonder if there's like Illuminati infiltration in there or something where, the Dalai Lama or something. I don't know. I don't want to say anything bad about the Dalai Lama. People are going to tear me up for that. But I don't know. You just, it doesn't make any sense that Buddhists. There's some Buddhist books I've read, there's a book called The Zen Eye who wrote, by Sokayan. Great book. He was a very prominent Buddhist monk who came over to the United States in the early 1900s. He was, missionary, came over from Japan. And in his book, he says, I think that when I see nirvana, I think it's what the Christians talk about with God. And, of course, that book's not one of the prominent Buddhist books out there. But, I mean, I think some of these guys know what I'm talking about. But just the mainstream Buddhist idea is that it's atheist. And I don't get where that's coming from. It's just suspicious.
Well, I think it's like a lot of the pagan religions that are led by the fallen angels, and just like Revelation 12, where it speaks about that ancient serpent, that old dragon, and how he deceiveth the entirety of the world. That these other religions, even though they may have aspects of bringing people to nirvanic states or to enlightenment with regard to awareness of moment, and even they teach about how to enter into the dream state in a conscious manner, and these things kind of like, which are really elevated and what you consider to be advanced spiritual teachings. But again, when you remove Christ as the truth and the way and the light, and as the protector, the savior, Messiah, then you have no alternative but to deal with Satan and the rebel angels, and they are certainly uh, willing to lead you astray. And yeah, they're gonna, even like the Luciferians, they are able to, and adept at magic and adept at conjuring up devils and dealing with demons directly, and having influence as far as black magic or even white magic, quote unquote white magic or whatever, even though that's the same thing. But um, they they have, and they are deceived themselves into thinking that magic is real, but Satan isn't, and hell isn't, and that it's all about um, empowering yourself, not relying on God or Christ or anybody else, but elevating yourself to be the Christ. And so all of that has led. It's the same lie that Satan told Adam and Eve, in the garden. I mean, it's the same thing that is being repeated nowadays. And so, unless you have that understanding, it's easy to get off track and led astray. I know initially when I was involved, for 20 years in the New Age and everything, it was difficult for me to grasp that God had a son. I was like, that seemed like just such a foreign concept. Why would God need to have a son? Because I didn't understand the whole thing about, he came to be born of a virgin in order to redeem us and to rectify the fall and to restore us back to our first estate, since the devil basically beguiled Adam and Eve, and I believe in the whole eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, good and evil, was the serpent beguiling Eve and impregnating her with Cain, which brought forth this whole serpent
Mhm.
lineage, and a whole
Mhm.
evil seed line, and that's why we have the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. But and so yeah, that he was redeeming all that and rectifying all that, and so now that I've read all the scriptures and studied all the extra biblical materials, I understand why God had a son and why He offered His Son to bring us forgiveness and redemption. But before, all that just seems so foreign to me, as it does to like the Muslims. They deny that
Mhm.
God has the Son, and that's why they're
Yeah.
you know, caught up in deception. So,
Yeah. I mean, to think about, there's a ransom for sin. Well, I
right.
mean, a ransom. I mean, sorry, not a inheritance is what we have, and the kingdom of God is something we inherit. Sorry, I didn't mean
Yeah.
to say that's another type of ransom about the atonement. But I mean, how do you get an inheritance? Somebody has to die. Well, God can't die because God is infinite and eternal and unchanging, and is will last forever. So, what he has to do is have a form of himself. I don't know how. I don't know. I'm a Trinitarian. I know there's a lot of
Yeah,
people
I
listening that
am.
probably.
I am as well.
Yeah, I know the anti-Trinitarian thing is huge right now, but I mean, I'm a strict. That's fine, and I know people disagree, but I'm an ironclad Trinitarian, and I mean, John 4:24. There's verses everywhere. Anyways,
Mhm.
but I mean, so God had to come in a certain version of himself that could die in human form, and then
Yeah.
therefore we get our inheritance. I mean, the cross is that's why, and there's all kinds of reasons. That's one of there's like 10 good atonement theories, and that's one of them, the inheritance theory, that explains why that's needed. I mean, it's just Christianity is a surprisingly elegant. I mean, you were just talking about
Right.
Muslims and
Right.
and so forth. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about also, Islam and Judaism. Two big. I mean, Islam's huge. Judaism, nowhere near as
Mhm.
big as Christianity, but still a huge religion. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about lately of how those started off in the same path Christianity did, and then they got led
Yeah.
astray.
Right.
I've been thinking lately, it talks in Mark and in Matthew about how people will come saying they're Christ, and they'll actually do miracles, of course, with demonic power, not with the power of God. And
Right.
people will be fooled, and they don't understand that when God actually comes in Perusia, the second coming, that we go up and meet him in the air. But so
Mhm.
people that aren't versed in their scripture, or if they're not uh, Christian, they're Islamic, for example, or of the Jewish religion, man, these are all the people that are going to be fooled
Right.
by the man of lawlessness, the Antichrist
Exactly.
someday.
Right.
And it's just, man, you're going to have, you can see why it says in Zechariah 14 that there'll be army when Jesus returns, there'll be armies surrounding Jerusalem, attacking,
Jerusalem.
just
Right.
destroying the city. I mean, you can kind of see the whole thing because you're going to have mobs of people under the spell of the Antichrist because they don't know their scripture and they don't know the truth behind things, and they're all deceived. And man, so I don't know. That could happen in our lifetime. It'd be pretty interesting if it does.
Yeah, I fully expect it to be because of the parable of the fig tree, and
Yeah.
yeah, in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, that know ye the parable of the fig tree, and in my opinion, because it talks about this in the Apocalypse of Peter, when he extra biblical text, he asks him specifically to explain the parable of the fig tree, and then he associates it with the nation of Israel and the regathering of Israel in 1948. In my opinion, was the blooming of the fig tree. So we are
Mm-hmm.
that generation. So, but
Hey, bring
since
it
we're
on, is what
talking
I say.
about, yeah, absolutely. Since we are talking about this too, let's tie this a little bit into the whole Darwinian, Copernican, heliocentric deception as it's been laid out over even since the Sumerian mythology, because 6,000 years ago, the heliocentric model was encoded into the Sumerian mythology, so that lets you know how far back the deception goes. But in my opinion, all that was established in order to lay the foundation and prepare the way for the coming of the Antichrist,
Hmm.
and that the ancient aliens are our creators. How do you feel about that, and do you see that coming on the forefront?
Well, it seems that, like you said, this is to come up with the converse and the anti-truth theory, the converse of the truth, which is the sun cult with the sun at the middle,
Mm.
and and everything's the satanic philosophy is in so many ways it just blows me away how it's the direct opposite of the true philosophy, which is the Christian philosophy, which is in Genesis 1 and Isaiah 40:22, blah blah blah, all over the Bible. Which you've got, if it says in the satanic philosophy the sun is large and far away, well then we know the truth is the opposite, that it's close and small.
Right.
So it's just amazing how I've just know. I mean, of course, we're still putting the flat Earth thing together, and I haven't even been working on it much this year. I mean, I've been working on it in my mind. Like every time I just out tonight, I was staring up at the dome and thinking about. I was thinking about it. I haven't put many videos up, but I mean, it just amazes me of how everything is such a diametric opposite. And also then that we have a reality which genuinely can be interpreted in two ways. It can be interpreted as we live on a heliocentric ball, or it can be interpreted as we live on a Christian flat plane. Because I was at Alabama. I mean, one thing that flat Earth. I mean, I've got criticisms of flat Earthers too. Um, One is, I mean, we're all talking about the Chicago skyline till we're blue in the face, and you shouldn't see it. But on the other hand, the buildings are lowered. So I mean, I see thousands of flat Earth videos coming out about how we shouldn't see the skyline, and I get it, I totally understand, and they're right. But then the anti-flats come out and say, sure, but the building, I only see the top of the Sears Tower. Why do I see it? And they say curvature. And so then there's this sort of stalemate. I think that I think people are talking about light refraction. Anyway, that my video that I made, I'm not trying to be the hero here, the superstar. I didn't even mention my name in the video I did, Zeteticism Volume 1, which is at my site, firmamentofpower.net, or zeteticism.com. Same, takes to the same place. So I'm not trying to be a hero, and anybody can take those videos and put them on their channel, and you don't even have to give me credit or anything. This isn't about me. This is about joy of the Creator, joy of God, and the flat Earth is an avenue into that. I mean, but I think that Zeteticism Volume 1 is the video that explains why on the flat plane we see from Benton Harbor, Michigan, we only see the top of the Sears Tower, and that's because if you of the light curvature, light doesn't travel in a straight line when it's going through varying densities of air. It'll curve
Hmm.
around. You can see the same thing when you put a stick in the water and it acts like it's curved, right? It's pouring the water because the light changes speed as from when it's reflecting off the stick through the air versus reflecting off the stick through the water. The light goes at different speeds, so it appears to be in different places. That's the same thing that's going on. That's why the sun, when it goes far enough, will all of a sudden be blocked out because the light is taken below the horizon. The horizon's only like what 15 or 20 miles away, and
Hmm.
then everything else is curved down in appearance, not in actuality, in appearance. And the way I explain, I mean, I understand perspective. I think there's two parts of it: perspective, and then light refraction. That's how we explain the sunset. That's how we explain why we only see the top of the Sears Tower from Benton Harbor, Michigan. And I was just in Alabama, and whenever my family and I would go on vacation as much as we can, and we're always going to beach places, and I'm always bringing my telescopes and my time lapses. I'm always bringing all my stuff to come up with more video footage and everything. And I just remembered this in February. We were in Alabama, Gulf Shores, Alabama, great place, and we were very fortunate because it was really warm last winter to have a good vacation there. It was warm, but there was this. We were watching ships go by all the time, and so this one day I had my telescope on the ship for a while. I wish I were to record it. It was such a good example. I just watched the ship go down under the horizon. Now, to my understanding, this doesn't happen. I made a video on it's called. This is one of the first flat Earth videos I did. I took that guy Red's Rhetoric, the anti-flat Earth guy. I did it. You probably know I did a debate against him, and absolutely demolished him. But one of the first videos I did, he did a video of a ship. Here it is. It's called Amazing Flat Earth Info. Red's Rhetoric uncut ship over horizon videos gives evidence for flat Earth. It's on Zeteticism.com. But that video, he basically puts his camera on a boat for an hour and a half. Really good, clear footage. And you can see right there, the boat does not go under the horizon at all.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is it gets kind of blurry in the distance. I trace it out down to the minutest detail. I show exactly how it gets blurred. So then when you see it, it just looks like it's only a sail. But that's just because it's too far away, and the sail and the hull get smeared together because you can't decipher the small, gap between them anymore. So it looks like only a sail. But anyway, the point is, what I would find though, if you go out like 20 or maybe I can't remember what, 25 or 30 miles, then things start to, in fact, go below the horizon. Like, for example, what the Sears Tower is doing. So it's not like there's this continual thing where, you go a little further and things lower a little more and a little further. And proportionally, like in a smooth slope of where proportionally the further things are away, the more they appear below the horizon. No, it's like nothing goes below the horizon. But then we got out like at 30 miles, then stuff all of a sudden starts to go below the horizon and fast in some cases. Like all the way by the time you get to Benton Harbor, Michigan, just the top of the Sears Tower is showing. So anyway, my point of saying all this is that, I mean, flat earthers are sort of leaving themselves vulnerable. If you don't explain why the Chicago horizon is only partially visible, then the anti-flats can come along and have a good complaint to say, well, the buildings are below the horizon. Who can explain that? I don't think perspective does that. I think that, because I understand that perspective can make it look like the bottom of a building is not there. I get that. But I'm talking just the top little teeny bit of the Sears Tower is visible from Benton Harbor. So, we got to explain that. The way to explain it is simple. It's light refraction. Now, so I've made up my own flat Earth model, which I know a lot of people don't like. It's called the Zetetic Gyroscope. And basically what it is it's like we're inside of a bowl, not a bowl, inside of a ball. And the bottom, maybe 10% of it or so, is the Earth plane. And it's apparently on stilts or something, like it says in many chapters or many verses in the Bible. But so it's going to have a little bit of a curve to it, in a concave curve. Nothing like not the concave Earth theory where it's like a bowl or something. Because the concave Earth theory does not work because you can't have sundogs at the horizon with the concave Earth theory. You have to have behind the sun part of the dome and right at the horizon. So the concave Earth theory does not allow for that. You have to have only convex surface behind the moon or the sun right at the horizon. So there's a big story behind that we can go into in a minute. But so the point is here is that just to take 20 seconds to explain my flat Earth model, the idea is that we're inside of a sphere. So the top of the sphere that we're looking up at is the dome. And then the bottom little portion, it's almost like there's inside of a small basketball, you've got like a dinner plate or maybe even a $50 or something. You spin it around, and then the dinner plate will fuse to the side of the ball because of centrifugal force. And then that's the centrifugal force. That's what we call gravity. I know most people hold the density theory to gravity, and that's fine. They may be right, and I could be wrong. This is just what I put together with. How did I put this together? We're something's spinning. We're spinning around. Now that's right there. That's what a lot of people don't like about my flat Earth model, because it involves motion of the Earth plane, and it's not any kind of motion like the crazy. What are we going, like 1,000 miles an hour at the equator or whatever? It's nothing like that. It's much slower. It's nothing compared to that. So it's hardly detected. The only way you can really detect it is things like with tides, with what we call gravity, which is in my model I call centrifugal force, and wind pattern, the four winds and so forth. Those are what how we can detect that there's motion, things like that. But other than that, it's really not detectable at all, and you'll never feel it or anything like that because it's just way too slow. It's just enough to give our 9.8 meters per second squared what we call gravitational force, which I call centrifugal. But that's in essence what the flat Earth model that I've created has, but it can explain the star trails, which I know there's a couple. I think there's probably some new theories out there that may be pretty good on how to explain them. But that's always one that seems to really grind against people, Even flat earthers like, man, we can't explain this one. Now, I mean, we're not supposed to be able, first of all, we're not supposed to be able to explain everything. I mean, we're just all a bunch of amateurs. The professional academics aren't going to study flat earth. So, because they're all hooked into their research papers and government grants and so forth. So you can forget them. I mean, people calling them up and trying to convince them. That's fun. I like watching those videos. Those are funny, but you're never going to convince them. Those people are brainwashed. I mean, I used to work in the university for 13 years teaching philosophy and math. So trust me, I know. But the star trails are perfectly explained by the gyroscope model I've made. Those are just simply the endpoints of the axis of rotation. So I mean, I remember when I put together the Zetetic, because right when I started becoming a flat earther, I was like, man, centrifugal force I know is where I'm going with what's behind gravitation. But how do you put it together? So then I started studying sundogs. I'm like, well, there's a dome up there. So okay, now we know there's a perfect. It can't be an ovoid dome. It has to be a spherical dome. So okay, so now I know two things with direct empirical evidence. Then you keep putting pieces and pieces together, and all of a sudden I got to this model of that we're inside this spinning sphere, very, very slow spinning sphere. Well, okay, then what do we see? We see star trails. And, the star trails on either end are just simply us witnessing the spinning around. So the stars are stationary in what is the third heaven or whatever they're in. And then we're moving with respect to them. Or it could be the opposite, that they've got some motion, but we can't detect it because they appear stationary to us. But anyway, that's not important. So, but I mean, something's moving with respect to something that we know. Now, I mean, I know there's a big movement to say the Earth is not moving because the Bible says it. Now, if my model contradicts the Bible, then my model is to be disregarded. But I don't think that it is. If you go down to scroll all the way down to the end of Zeteticism.com, firmamentofpower.net, you'll see the second to last video. It says the Bible and Zetetic Gyroscope model for flat Earth, episode 1, the Earth does not move. And I just go through those Bible verses. And there's basically two sorts of Bible verses. Some that say the Earth doesn't move and is fixed, and then some that say the Earth doesn't move and is fixed in its foundations. And so I just was kind of thinking, well, which is it? Is it both or is it one or the other? And I kind of just went with the idea that it's fixed in its foundations because something's moving. We know from looking at the star trails that something's moving around somehow in the sky. So I kind of take a view that a lot of people don't like, that there is motion, the Earth is moving, but it's just fixed in its foundations, like it says in Psalm 104. Is it 104:5, I think? So, anyways.
Well, that's an interesting model. Now, when you say star trails, are you talking about the southern stars and how they move in the opposite direction?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I prayed about that and asked, and the insight that I got on that, and it's interesting because we had released in a show that both me and P Brain had done where we talked about how the reason I believe that the stars move in the opposite direction once you go past the celestial equator is because the firmament in the lower half of the firmament below the celestial equator is so large that just like as the sun, when it gets so far away from us, it starts to dip down towards the horizon in going to the vanishing point. Not that it's descending in elevation or changing in altitude, but in perspective that we see it just as when it enters into our field of vision, it pops up near the horizon and then arcs across the sky and rises towards, it reaches its apex somewhere around noon and then begins to descend towards the horizon for sunset as it moves away from us. But in my opinion, the stars are doing the same. And so what we see is that when you look towards the west and to the east, you see the stars doing that same thing, which gives them the appearance of spinning in the opposite direction. And it's interesting because just recently, somebody had contacted Jaron about what is a magnifying glass, a half dome magnifying glass. I don't know if you saw that particular video that I'm talking about, but he basically looked at the stars as we see them at night, and then looked through the sides of this particular dome-shaped magnifying glass, and it shows the same thing that I'm talking about with the
Mm.
circularity, and so this was a visual confirmation to what basically the Most High had told me about the width and the dome being of such large, as far as going past the celestial equator. But anyways, I did create a video. I'll send that to you so you can
Yeah,
visually
please
get a
do.
better understanding of what I'm talking about. But anyways, I want to talk about also the sundog and the information that you brought forth, because what you did with all of that was absolutely brilliant in my opinion, because I wrote my 10th book was on the firmament, the vaulted dome of the earth, where I brought forth all these different parallel accounts of creation, the first 4 days, and specifically the second day being a focus on the rakia, or the stereoma, as they speak about it in the Greek, and that it's this solid structure above us,
Hmm.
being semi-transparent, and that the sundog is one of the visuals for confirmation of this. But can you talk about your work with that,
Hmm.
and what you did to affirm? Because I thought your work was brilliant with
Yeah,
regard to all
yeah,
this.
yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, there's three things that I've done. Again, this isn't about me. I'm not special. I'm just an ordinary slob, and there's nothing special about me. Anything that I might have done that, like you just said, that you thought was impressive is simply the result of prayer. Because when I
Hmm.
came across the flat Earth in very, very early 2015, man, I was praying on it, and it was just such a revelation.
Yes.
I had all these thoughts of like, I knew it. I knew the Bible was right, and I just want to go
Right.
tell everybody, like, you're wrong for questioning it. There's so many
Right.
people in churches, that want to believe science instead of the Bible, the science of the Bible.
Right.
They're crazy. They don't
Yes.
even. It's almost like they don't even believe God. If they don't have that, if they have that week of anyway. I mean,
Yeah,
but
I agree with you.
there's three things that I've done that I think that really helped out the flat Earth community. Whether or not, I don't know how well known they are, but one was the sunset, and that was with that abode, and then two is sundogs, and then three is the Zeteticism Volume 5, which I'll go into in just a second. But I have to kind of discuss these all at once, and then I can go into the sundogs thing. So let me just give a minute or
Yeah,
two
sure.
intro.
No worries.
But the sunset, if you go to that second to last video on Zeteticism Volume, or on Zeteticism.com, you can see in the bottom right corner, I've got a picture that I drew of what the Zetetic Gyroscope model I made involves. And you can see it like it has a huge, the dome is huge compared to the Earth.
Right.
And but I mean, if you do have that slight bending, if the Earth plane isn't perfectly flat, but it's got a little bit of a bend, so it's still a zetetic plane. It's not anything like the silly concave Earth theory, which is totally wrong.
Mhm.
And there's a bunch of weird people that follow that theory. I gotta
Right.
say. Anyways, hope I don't regret saying that later. But I think you know what I'm talking about too,
Yeah. Yeah.
though.
Right.
But if you have a slightly bent zetetic plane, then you know what happens then is that when things get far out in the distance, they travel to us through a varying air density such that
Mhm.
the air will bend. The light will bend through the air, which will make things appear in the distance be lowered. That's why
Right.
when we
Right.
look out at the horizon in Lake Michigan, we can look and see the waves right at the horizon. It's only probably about 20, 30 miles away in your telescope. It's you're not when you see the top of the Sears Tower in the distance, and then you see the water that sort of bumps into it, and your view of it in Benton Harbor. The water that you're seeing isn't the water that's in Chicago. The water is only about 30 miles away. That's so things curve down in appearance then. But if you have a bent surface, like bent zetetic plane, just slightly bent, man. When I remember when I came on this, I was like, yes, this is it. Just take the zetetic plane and just bend it a little bit, and then anything in the distance, the light traveling through you goes through a varying air density such that objects appear lower. They'll be pushed down below the horizon. So the horizon is closer to you. Objects behind them will appear artificially lowered. That's why we have sunsets in the Sears Tower, or sorry, the Willis Tower, whatever it's called now, appearing lower. So that's one thing that I thought
What
was
about
just
temperature? Do you think? Because I
yeah,
think
all that,
temperature
and it
also
could
affects that
yeah,
as
it
well.
could the same place. If you're in Benton Harbor, you can one day you look at the Sears Tower, and then the next day it'll be a little bit lower, and it'll all vary because of all this
Right.
atmospheric distortion going on. Yeah, I mean it's just so obvious. It's like only people studying are amateurs like me and you. But of course, we all know what amateurs have done in the past when we look at people like Einstein and so forth, and discoveries of superconductivity. It's usually amateurs that are breaking and finding the truth. But then the second thing, well, anyway, another thing that I thought that I really, through prayer, really contributed to the flat Earth world. And this is something I don't think anybody really knows about. It's Zeteticism, Volume 5 on my site. That one, I think, proves beyond a shadow of a doubt. I mean, rock solid proof that there is a slight bending to the Zetetic plane. And I do that through just simply making a simple study. I think the video is only about 45 minutes long, of the patterns of sunlight when the sun is setting, right when if you look at it over water, right when it's setting, right when it gets towards when it's going to quote touch unquote the water, you can study the pattern of light all the way from the sun to the beach. Those patterns of light don't stay the same. They're different in different parts of the world. Now, then somebody's got to explain to me how you can have a global Earth. It should be exactly the same in every single case. And I model that, what it should look like, because I take a lighter behind a curved surface and show what it should look like. And man, 9 times out of 10, the sunset pattern looks the opposite. So what does that tell you? That the Earth isn't a curve like we think it is in the heliocentric model. It has a tiny bit of bending the opposite way. I don't want to use the word concave, because then people start thinking I'm talking about the concave theory, but it's not an actual concave surface because it doesn't have that much curvature to it. But it has an opposite curvature in the opposite way as the globe Earth model, and it's right there. All anybody has to do is go to the beach, and I mean, then there's all kinds of ways to verify this. The way the sunlight patterns, everything about what the sun is doing at the last points of sunset over water shows that the Earth is not a globe, and it has the opposite shape, to some small bend in the opposite direction. So anyway, that goes with the whole sunset model. So that kind of goes together. Explaining the sunset with both perspective and with light refraction through looking at objects out over a great distance, and then they appear artificially lower. Those and then proving that there's this bend with light patterns at sunset. I think Zeteticism Volume 5 is the biggest thing that I put out. Again, when I say I don't mean me. I mean that this is through prayer. These are answered prayers. So I don't want to give all credit goes to Christ.
Yes.
So, but I don't know, man. I think that video only has about it's been out for a year. I only has about 2,000 views. But I remember I told some other flat earthers, like, I think that's the video that has some of the most. There's like 10 or 15 pieces of flat Earth evidence that are just prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I think that in Zeteticism Volume 1 is one of the things that just proves it. How can you have sunlight patterns off of the reflection of water that don't correlate with a convex surface? It's done deal. And another thing, just actually real quick here, then before going to sundogs, which kind of ties this all together. I mean, here's another rock solid proof. I even put this on a video. I think I was on Veritas Radio, and I just mentioned this once, and this is the only time I've ever said it. I was going to make videos on it. I just haven't gotten around to making videos much lately. But how about this then? What happens when? So we all know astronomers put telescopes high up on mountains, right? Because why do they do that? Because they get less light interference. Less atmospheric distortion and interference, and they can see the stars better. Okay, right? Well, what happens when you're in a jet plane flying over those mountains where the telescopes are? You can't hardly see any stars in a plane. I've flown in planes so many times, and I remember when I became flat Earth, I'm like, why can't I see stars very well from? It should be overwhelming, because if you look at what astronomers are, I mean, anybody ever gone to Rocky Mountain National Park and camped out overnight? You look up at the stars, you're like, I can't believe it. This is unbelievable. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. They're so bright compared to anything I've ever seen. Right. So when you go in a plane, you're far higher than that. They should be even more brilliant. And what do you see? Like nothing. Okay, that Zen right there, that's a dead proof dead proof. Any academic that ever hears this and now or in the future is going to not be able to explain the heliocentric model with the fact that when we go in a plane over those mountains, it's almost like stars get brighter as you go up, and then they stop getting brighter, and then they become almost vanished, almost not visible when you get at 30 or 40,000 feet. What in the world's going on? That is a dead proof that the heliocentric model is wrong, and there's something radically different going on than what the quote experts unquote are telling us. So I just think this is exciting stuff. I mean, we all can, these aren't, like NASA proofs where we have to go in a secret lab and be in a
Right.
secret society, and then we say, oh, we've proven it. And then you go tell everybody on TV, nobody else can prove it. You prove it in your lab or with your billion-dollar telescope, but nobody else can see it. That's not a proof. That's theory. Okay, proof is when we all can get in a plane, we all can see that the stars basically aren't even visible hardly. You can see a couple stars here and there. It's just not what you should see. That's a real scientific proof when we all can prove it and we all can see with our own eyes. I mean, so the point is that the flat Earth science is far more sophisticated, far more scientific than the garbage we're getting out of the universities. I know everybody listening that's a flat earther already knows that, but it's just fun to, drive it home with good examples. But anyway, so the third thing I think that I did that was really, I was led to put out is, sundogs. I remember, I don't know how it happened, Zen. I remember I was at my parents. I don't hang out with my parents that much, actually. I just happened to be at my parents this one time. This is like in, I don't know, spring of 2015 or so. I was really into studying flat Earth a lot. And I remember I'm thinking, I know sundogs are a big, big hint. What is it, Psalm 19:1, the heavens declare your handiwork. I mean, so I'm like, okay, right there, that's where we need to look. God is showing himself, revealing himself right in front of everybody in the heavens. There's verses all over the Psalms about that. Worship him in his firmament of power. Isn't that Psalm 50 verse 1 in the King James? I mean, man, so we're supposed to be Psalm 5:3. In the morning when I pray, I look up. We are instructed to look up at him, revealing himself to us and worship him there. That's why my website is called firmamentofpower.net. Zeteticism.com, same place. So anyways, so I remember I was just really meditating on this and praying about this. And finally I was just like, I know it's a dome. Let's just see what happens if I put a lighter in. Let's find a perfectly, spherical glass bowl. And my parents happened to have one at their house. I took a lighter and I put it in and I messed around a little bit. And all of a sudden, boom, right there. A perfect, the parhelia of the sundogs formed in a perfect. And I was like, I knew it, because you can just kind of conceptually think about it. The way light rays should reflect off a concave surface will create a convergence in 4, but mainly 2 places side to side of the light source. And man, I remember when I saw that, I almost fell down and wept, because I was like, it was just so obvious and so proven. Then I made Zeteticism Volume 2. Now that video, I need to redo that video. I just thought about this so much more. If I redid it, I could come up with a much more sophisticated video. I've got so much more data. I read that book, Halos and Atmospheric, or whatever it is, by those guys in Sweden or whatever, the supposed experts on sundogs who say it's because of light crystals or whatever, which it is, but they're missing part of the story of how's the light coming in to reflect off the light crystals. They can't explain that, but we flat earthers can. We can reproduce it experimentally with a lighter and a bowl. So, but anyways, I mean, a sundog, if anybody doesn't know, just go to Google and Google sundog. It's just, I mean, sundogs I saw one 2 days ago, very vivid. They are there all the time. It just depends. Okay, let me back up. If any of you have a like a solar dish or whatever, or you just take like a glass bowl or something and put it in the sun, and you'll know that you can reflect sunlight in a certain way where you can light things on fire, with a concave surface. Everybody's done that. That's essentially what a sundog is. Light converges when it reflects off a concave surface. It converges in a certain way, and that's the Zeteticism Volume 3. I think that's the best video I've ever done. I think that just proves it beyond a shadow of a doubt that sundogs are the reflection of the back of the sun off a concave surface. In other words, the dome, the firmament of power. But yeah, and that, I mean, what you see in Zeteticism Volume 3 is it took me a while to figure this out because I came up with Zeteticism Volume 2, which basically just showed how you can replicate a sundog with artificially with the glass bowl and so forth, and then how it mimics sundogs that we see in the sky. It's a scientific name for them, are parhelia. I like sundog better personally, but then Zeteticism Volume 3. Then I noticed though that a lot of the parhelia. So essentially, what a sundog is the sun, and then on either side of it, I think 22 degrees, is like another sun shows up. Now, if any of you start to look at the sun, you'll see, I mean, not at the sun, but you're looking in the sky and seeing what the sun is doing, you'll see the parhelia on either side every day. It just depends. Those aren't out where the sun is, or they're not at the top of the atmosphere or something. Those are light convergences down where we are here near the surface of the Earth. They're very, very close. It took me a while to figure that out. Of course, I didn't figure it out. I was led to have that figured out in me by the Creator. But because I noticed a lot of sundogs, the parhelia on either side would, like, there'd be the sun in the background, and then the parhelia would be in front of mountains in the shade and in front of buildings. I'm like, what in the world's going on? How can that be? It almost made me think that it was in line with the scientific, the professional science view. They just think that there's light crystals. They just basically say sunlight reflects off light crystals and forms sundogs. They don't have any way to show why this specific halo structure with the parhelia on either side forms. They just sort of skip that whole part. The book Atmospheric Halos you can just go look up Atmospheric Halos. Man, it's right behind me. I can't remember the full title. It's a green cover. You'll see it if you go to Amazon, type in Atmospheric Halos, the green covered book. You'll see it. Though that's the big quote textbook unquote for sundogs, and that professional scientists have put out. Now, their chapter on why the sundog has a specific shape it does is like 3 pages. No lie, in that book. I mean, which is a complete joke. I mean, how can? I mean, in other words, and then when you read it, they don't say anything other than we don't know. It just is what happens. Right. Of course, we flat earthers, we know exactly why, because it's convergence points. That's what the parhelia are, off light coming in from a concave surface. Just like you can, when you light something on fire with a concave surface with a magnifying glass or whatever, shining it through through sunlight. So, but I remember seeing, like, in Zeteticism Volume 3, there's somebody in Moscow who took a video of a sundog while they're on a subway train going through this big area of tall apartment buildings. It's the most amazing sundog video ever, because all those sundog parhelia, these buildings are close up and you can see the parhelia on the shaded side of the building. I remember when I first saw that, I was like, what is going on? But it makes complete sense, because a convergence point coming in from the dome is going to be spread out over a number of miles. So, of course, you're going to see a faint bit of the parhelia, even right close up to you, even if it could be even a few feet from you. Now, there's all kinds of convergence points that happens with a sundog. I'm just talking about the 2 parhelia to the right, to the left of the sun. There's convergence points above it, below it, below the parhelia. They're all over the place. I mean, just sundogs can have incredibly high repeatable. It's always the same structure, though. It's never a varying structure, which the professional scientists are going to have to explain why in a varying atmosphere we have basically a uniform sundog shape, which they're going to have a difficult time explaining. So, in general, the academics have nothing. All they can explain, the only fact they really have, is that sundogs are caused by light reflecting off atmospheric moisture, whether it's ice crystals or snow or fog or whatever. And other than that, they've got nothing. And the flat earthers are who can explain everything else. But yeah, I mean,
let me ask
you
go ahead. Something really quick with regard to that. Do you think that sundogs are more predominant in northern latitudes?
No.
Not at all. Well, what I was going to ask is just that because it seems like, and I'm not saying that it doesn't happen in other places, but I was just wondering if it was predominantly more as far as the occurrence of it, just because we know that the vaulted dome comes together at above Polaris, that's the central height, and I was just wondering if that affected the occurrence of that, or but you're saying it doesn't.
No, I mean, I think it's Zeteticism Volume 2. I have video of sundogs, which is purportedly from the Amazon and the
Hmm.
Caribbean.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, when we say, I've heard people say that. Hang on, I have to clear my throat. Sorry about that.
You're good.
I've heard people say things like, I've seen them comment on my videos, um, saying that we know there's a dome because we can kind of see, if we go out in the night sky, we can kind of see it curve around. And I'm thinking, no, you can't. That's not. I mean, that can't be right because we're only seeing a portion. This dome is massive. I mean, if we could
Right.
see the whole dome all the edges all over the place, then we'd be able to see the edges of the Earth all over the place too. But we don't because light
Right.
curves makes things curve apart. That's why we can't see. I hear so many times people say, well, we should be able to see, the coast of France from New York City. No, you can't because light, even if you had crystal clear light that allowed you to do that, light bends down because of reasons we already explained. So you can't. It's just all you're going to see is a horizon about 30 miles away. That's
And
it.
there's limitations to as far as the visibility and all
Yeah,
that.
even if hypothetically there wasn't a light curvature of refraction that made things artificially appear lower, you're still not going to see past about 100 miles anyway.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Because of all that, all the junk in the air. So it just people ask such dumb questions when uh, when they're just trying to desperately attack
Right.
empirical evidence.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, no. When you're looking at the dome, you're just seeing maybe 30% of it or something. Like if, for example, if I'm looking up at the Milky Way, I know the Milky Way is, I mean, I can see it from where I am here in Michigan, but I mean, I can't see all the way down to what people are seeing in Ushuaia, or is that how you pronounce it? Ushuaia, South America. And because they're seeing a different part of the dome than me, and light bends in such a way to make things appear lower so that I can see parts of the dome that they can't see, and vice versa. So
Right. Right.
that I mean that's my answer. I mean I'm not saying I know everything here, and we're all just kind of trying to feel this whole thing out and put all amateurs put this
Fully.
together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
I got another question for you with regard to as far as the expanse of the dome. Do you think that it comes down near the Antarctic ice wall, or do you think that there is land beyond? And the reason I ask that is because of that 1,000-year-old Buddhist map that was found in one of the temples in somewhere in Japan, and that was brought back by, I forget the guy's name, but his brother had found it in one of the Buddhist temples, and it shows all these different islands out beyond that particular barrier. And so I was wondering, um, with regard, because we see the Southern Cross, it seems to be that the firmament extends out beyond that, and how far that goes, we don't know, of course, because we're not allowed to go beyond a certain point, and certainly they're not letting us investigate this kind of stuff either. But on speculation, what do you think with regard to that?
yeah. I'm glad you said on speculation. Speculatively, I mean my model that I made is kind of in agreement with a lot of the other flat Earth views. Is that there's a lot more going out past the supposed limit of
Yeah,
Antarctica.
yeah,
So there's definitely a lot of space uh, for there to be a lot of land there. But I think the dome comes down. I don't know if it touches. It definitely touches the stilts or the legs
yeah.
that the
Somewhere it
Earth is on.
merges. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but as far as it there's probably a point where there's some kind of an edge, and then you can look on and you can see. That'd be interesting to see. You can see the dome in the distance there in a different way than we could now. I remember. I remember there was a time then when I was way back when I was exploring. I was thinking about oceans above and oceans below. And I remember one time I put my telescope and just looked straight up at the sky and the blue, and I was like, I wonder if I could see waves or something. Of course, I couldn't because that was sort of a primitive view I had of the whole thing back then, early on. But that just sort of rang through my mind. If you're at the edge and you're that much closer to the dome, say you went way beyond the Antarctic wall. I kind of am a wall theorist, by the way. I know that's kind of been attacked lately, but I still kind of hold. Now I don't know though. I've not been to Antarctica. I've got a video up that says it's titled "24-Hour Antarctica Sunlight is Not Scientific Information." In that video, basically what I say is, my Zetetic Gyroscope model actually can explain 24-hour Antarctica sunlight. But what I say in that video is Nobody knows because how many people are in Antarctica? A couple 10,000 ever been there on the whole planet?
Right.
Or I don't know how many. Or
Uh-huh.
even if it was a million, it doesn't matter. If you can show that there's, if you can bring down buildings in New York City and say planes did it when there's no planes there, then you can say anything to
Yeah.
anybody and people are going to believe whatever. So I mean,
Right.
nobody
Right.
really knows is the point. But I mean, my model allows for a whole lot more to be going on beyond what we think, where we think Antarctica is, though. Just to answer your question.
Yeah. Yeah. I fully agree, and I think even like I in this new book I study also the Vedic cosmology, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and all that it talks about with the Bhumandala and the different the description of the circle of the earth, and it all also matches, and I show this in parallel account, the description of the movement of the sun as it goes back and forth between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, as Enoch also describes its motion back and forth, and that's what creates the seasons. And it's in its movement when it is over the equator. That's when we have the vernal equinox and the autumnal equinox, and when it
Mm-hmm.
reaches these extremes, that's the summer solstice and the winter solstice. And so this Vedic cosmology also affirms the same thing, and speaks about it in similar manner. And then in the second book of Enoch, there's a description of these same motions as applicable to the sun as it moves back and forth between these 2 points. But this is also something that can be affirmed, when you go out on the winter solstice, you can see the sun in its extreme southern setting. At sunset, it will set at its extreme southern latitude, and then it reverses course and starts to move back towards the north. And on the vernal equinox, it's there where it divides the day and the night into equal 12-hour portions. And then in the summer solstice, when it's above the Tropic of Cancer, that's when it's at its northern limits. And so, we can visually see on the horizon during these particular times and these particular dates that this is exactly what the sun is doing as it is moving back and forth between these tropics. And so, in my mind, that again verifies the premise that Enoch is putting forth, and that is affirmed by some of these other ideologies and these ancient wisdom texts, and that it affirms that it is the sun and the moon and the other heavenly luminaries which are moving in circuit above the earth, just as it says in Psalms 19. Speaking about the sun running a circuit almost like a race, like a groomsman, that whole thing. And so those things affirm, just like with the story of Isaiah 38, where it speaks about the sun going back 10 degrees on the sundial, um, and how Joshua was given the authority to stop the sun and the moon and not the earth and the moon, if it's supposedly the earth which is spinning, which causes the sun to go down. All these things come to light in greater manner and greater understanding when you understand that yes, it is the luminaries which are moving in circuit above us. And so, in my opinion, those things are what we see as far as the motions of the luminaries every day too, as far as the sun and the moon and how all that works. In my
Yeah,
opinion.
it's just interesting how I don't know about you, but I'm just blown away all the time by. I mean, there's like I said a little while ago, there's like 15 pieces of just rock solid flat Earth evidence that just can't be. There's some stuff I think that like I'm not a believer in the whole sun rays, spreading out shows where the sun is. I put a video out on that, which I don't think. I mean, there's some stuff that kind of had to be tossed aside, but there's a when this whole flurry of flat Earth information came out, some of it was sharpened, some of it was tossed aside, and then new stuff came to light. But I mean, it's some of like the core information that really proves it. It's just amazing to me how people aren't. I mean, if I was like an academic that wanted to say, say I studied astronomy, I wanted to save my job or something, and I saw this flat Earth stuff. I mean, the good stuff that really proves it. Wouldn't you? I mean, Zen, wouldn't you be like, I don't care about my job. This is so exciting. I just want to know more and more and more about it. Who cares about,
Mhm.
I'd just be addicted to, the new information, and everything you're saying. The religious view is the right view. That's what's
Right. Right.
amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, I sat in university. I taught. I've gone to school in universities forever, and I taught in universities teaching philosophy for 13 years. And I've heard professors. I used to say when I was an atheist, I used to say, back in 2001, 2, 3, 4, before I became a theist, when I was first teaching, I would say to students the same thing I would just mimic what I heard other professors saying. And I would say we used to have religion in the Bible, and I'd always attack the Bible, of course, because being an atheist and a non-saved person, I just simply, all that was behind that is I simply hated God. I knew He was real. I just hated Him because I was,
Mhm.
unsaved, and 1 John
Right.
3:8, those who sin are of the devil. I was just a child of Satan,
Yeah.
like as unsaved people are, sadly. But I would say to him, we used to have religion to tell us the way the world is. Now we know that that's all just fiction and myth.
Right.
Now we have
Right.
science to tell us the truth. Amazing that is so wrong. Religion
Right.
has been
Yeah.
true. When I say religion, I'm talking Christianity. I know other religions
Mhm.
have pieces of it, but
Yeah.
Christianity is the full picture of the
Right.
science of the physical reality.
Yeah.
Man, and
And
it was right
prophetic.
all along.
Yeah. The prophetic nature of the scriptures as well.
I mean, it's just ceaselessly exciting for me to know when
Mhm.
I read the science in the Bible, I know I'm reading fact, and I
Right.
can trust that because not just because of my faith and all the experience of God I've had and so forth, but just logically, just with my little feeble human mind, I've seen flat Earth information line up with the Bible, and that's the real science. I hope and pray that I don't know if it's going to happen because we're heading into Antichrist times, and the world is
Right.
dark and full of sinners that are blind and so forth. So I don't know if it'll happen, but I would love. Would it just be awesome if flat Earth could just lead the world into just some kind of Christian revolution all over the place?
I think it really is, brother. For a lot of people, I know that
Mm-hmm.
even for very militant atheists and hardcore agnostics, that they coming to this truth, they understand that um, there is a creator, and so it causes them to at least accept that premise. And then, even though still a lot of people haven't gone beyond that point, when they begin to examine the scriptures and the fact that this information has been encoded into not only the Bible but many of the extra biblical texts, as I show with, the flat Earth as key to decrypt the Book of Enoch, that these texts have this information encoded into them for thousands of years, and that even though this knowledge has been lost for the last 500 years and we've been led into deception and led astray, still the truth has been there all along. And yeah, it's very exciting because, in my opinion, and especially as believers, it affirms the truth of the scriptures and the prophetic nature of the scriptures, and the fact that, again, now that we know um, that there's not measurable curvature with regard to the shape of the earth as described in sphericity and rotundity, that it's not like the whole way that they've put forth with the Copernican model, that certainly the Bible explains and answers that, and
Mm-hmm.
that when we begin to study things like Job and the Book of Enoch and other places, as I show in my work, because that's my love, is to bring forth all the scriptures which share and help us to understand these things better, and that's my approach to the flat Earth, is through the scriptures. Which reminds me, I wanted to ask you if you had heard about that book that I just recently found called the Ever New Tongue, and how it describes in it, and it's like an Irish apocryphal text, but in it describes also how everything it calls the earth a wheel, and how everything was established in circularity like that, even the stars and the way that they move. But it's a fantastic text because it explains the Genesis narrative as given to Moses, but in totally new light. And when you study and look into this particular text, it affirms the whole premise of the flat Earth as we're talking about it, and it's
Hmm.
just a another confirming witness to the things that are being brought out as truth now.
Yeah, I think I've listened to some of those shows that you've discussed that, and I think that was one of the ones that I Skyped you a couple of weeks ago and said, "Man, I can't believe how much that information is in line with the Zetetic Gyroscope model that I came up with."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Again, I'm not out there. I haven't even been on. This is the first radio show I've done since Veritas, which I think was last year. So it's not like I'm out trying to promote myself, like, oh, I'm the hero that's. But I mean, it's the more and more I look at the Zetetic Gyroscope model that I came up with, that I was led to put out without my name really attached much to it because I'm not looking for fame. The more I'm surprised that it really checks out a lot. And I'm one thing that's sort of bothering me is the moon. I know the moon is creating its own light. It doesn't have front lit properties. That's not um, sun reflection and so forth. But a lot of the things, the moon is something I'd really like to put out a video that just nails it, or at least not me or somebody just nail that the whole thing. I mean, like for example, one thing about the moon is I remember I was on vacation last summer, not the summer we just finished, but in 2016, Lake Huron, we rented a cabin. And of course, every night I'm out there looking at stars and the moon's doing so forth. I remember there was a crescent moon, like the real fine crescent moon, which created a moon dog. Now, what you're thinking? Well, wait a minute. How can the crescent moon create a moon dog? Because a moon dog would have to be the reflection of the moon off the dome, and then we're seeing the converging light coming in on it of moon. So, I mean, basically, what I've come to is the moon must look the same back and front. Now, do I have evidence for that? No. This is just something that would explain how we can have a crescent moon. In other words, not a full. If you have a full moon, how can you have a moon dog? Because we're told that only the front is lit up and the
Right.
back isn't. So how could you have a moon
Right.
dog? Well, the theory that I go by is the back of the moon is that looks. We're not seeing the back. Why is anybody thinking the back's not lit up the same? It must look the same. There's just something going on. If somebody can figure out the moon in real empirical terms and really put out something that just nails it, that we all can verify, not this garbage theoretical stuff the academics are doing, that would be a big piece of the puzzle. And that's something I don't want to say I've been working on it, but it's something when I'm like walking out to the car or taking my son for a walk at night or something to get him to sleep. I've got a little 3-year-old guy. That's the kind of stuff I'm sitting there thinking about, trying to figure out, like, how does the moon work? And that would be, I mean, we know it. The weirdest thing about the moon then is it moves. It literally moves. If you look at time lapse footage of the moon through its cycle, it moves around and it gets bigger and smaller in
Mm.
appearance. I mean, I don't know if it's literally coming closer, that's why it gets bigger, or if it's literally getting bigger and it's stationary, but it moves like a gyroscope that is not spinning. I mean, what in the world? That is really. It's almost like, I think I've heard other people say it. It's almost like there's a gyroscope inside of it, and it's a membrane, and that the spinning around could have something to do, like there's a two-way light source or something, like in a literal lighthouse inside of a membrane. And so we're seeing it. We're seeing the outer membrane, which is stationary, but inside there's a gyroscope spinning. Why do people said, why gyroscope? Well, I mean, I came up with the Zetetic Gyroscope model because it's just what everything pointed towards. The whole way to explain tides is to say that the Earth is spinning inside of a gyroscope. Same with wind currents and star trails and so forth. But man, if you look at there's gyroscopes. All the heavenly bodies are moving in gyroscopes. The gyroscopes are a thing that the creator is very fond of using. So it's not surprising that the whole system would be a big gyroscope. Again, I'm not saying I've got the answer and my theory is right and everybody else is wrong. It's just like if you watch the Zeteticism Volume 4, that's where I really try to piece together how this model works, where you get from one piece of evidence to the next piece of evidence, and then you get to about 7 pieces of evidence, and then you really are at this Zetetic gyroscope model. But anyway, but thinking about the moon, a moon dog, it would have to be the case that there's light in back, and so, like I said, why not think of that the moon is illuminated the same back and front? The moon is sort of up for grabs. We know so little of it. We just see this thing up in the sky. I was just looking at it a little while ago. Oh, Zen, another thing, a huge thing I want to talk about. I've never said this on radio or anything. It's just something I've been thinking about, and I wanted to use your show to sort of get it out there.
Yeah,
I don't have time to make a video. Somebody may have, though, already figured this out. But have you ever noticed, Zen, that when you see the moon during the day, it's a single image. But when it starts right about twilight, all of a sudden, and then into the night, the moon becomes blurry. Like everybody can go look at it right now. I think it's probably pretty low down in the sky right now, the half moon, but you can probably still see it. Well, wait till after the show, and then go look at it. But I mean, the moon is a double. You see the moon itself, and then there's a copy of it, which you have to focus for a second. If you look at them, like I said to my wife, I say, well, this was a couple months ago. I said, look at the moon. What do you see? Her first response was, I didn't prep her at all. She said her first response was, it's blurry. And I'm like, exactly. And I said, how is it blurry? And she stared at it for a little bit. And it took her a minute or so. And she said, it's almost like there's two moons. There's a double image, a faint one just to the left, maybe a 10% of the moon length over to the left. And then there's the moon image itself, and it makes the whole thing look blurry. And if you look up articles on Google, why does the moon appear blurry and so forth, people say because super far objects, all of a sudden everybody's, got eye problems and so forth. That's why it appears blurry. But Zen, I'm telling you, what happens when a light source, go get a light source, go take a lighter and shine it through a thick pane of glass. Like I've got a piece of stained glass windows, and I live in a real old house. There's some stained glass, but some of it's clear, not colored stained glass, and it's real thick. And if I go outside and shine a lighter through it and look at it, there's the front of it, and then it's a thick pane. I'll see the same exact double image of the light. I'll see the lighter itself, and then there'll be a copy of it over to one side. I can sort of angle it, and it can move around and so forth. But there's two. Obviously the one is the reflection of the sun or the light going through the window. So that's why I'm seeing the second. So from what I can tell, if everybody's following what I'm saying, if you put all this together, when we're looking at the moon, we're looking at it through some kind of transparent, well, let's say dome. Now, we all know there's a number of domes up there. There's not just one dome. There's more than one dome. When the sun's reflecting off, the back of the sun's reflecting off a dome to create a sundog, that's not the first dome, apparently. Apparently, there's at least one between us and the sun, and one between us and the moon. Now, we know this from the double image of the moon that I just explained, but also, more interestingly, if you look at a sundog, have you ever, this is something else I haven't said on radio before. I've just been dying to make videos on these and just haven't had time, so what a great thing we can talk about it now. If you look at a sundog, it's got all the different pieces of it, but when you create a sundog with the glass bowl, like I did in Zeteticism Volume 2, you only get the parhelia on either side, which, then they've got the long, the part. It really forms really well-defined parhelia that look exactly like what you see in the sky. But what about all the other parts of the sundog? The parhelic circle and so forth. All these are created by this. It looks like the sun. Like if you look at the let me look up the parts of the sun. I've forgotten some of the names. I want to make sure I get it right. But what we're looking at, a lot of these reflections are happening because the sun is shining. It appears is shining through another dome. So it's not so everybody wonders how can the sun be held up there, whatever. For all we know, there's a completely different dimension up there. We know that those are the heavens. That's what they're called in the Bible. So we know it's something going to have a different energy or different vibe or whatever you want to say than down here in fallen reality. I'm not saying it's unfallen up there, but at some point it becomes unfallen if you go high enough up. But what we're looking at when we look at the sun and the moon is, it appears from what we're saying is we're looking at them through the first or maybe the first couple domes, and then what creates moondogs and sundogs is a further away dome. You follow what I'm saying there?
I understand what you're saying. I haven't seen, as far as evidence of this within Scripture, but certainly visual. I will most certainly pay more attention and examine this. But you're not the only person that has mentioned this to me.
Okay. I wondered. I thought somebody else might have figured this out.
Yeah, no, there's a group of individuals that are working on what they call a toroidal kind of uh, cosmological, the electromagnetic, the
Yeah.
universe
Mhm.
model,
Yep. Mhm.
and they were talking about how that the sun and the moon are projections that the light is somehow projected from outside and through the lens of the dome,
Oh
and
wow. Yeah.
that's what
Exactly.
we're seeing,
Yep.
yeah, on the inside, which is absolutely mind blowing.
Mhm.
Um, but this is what they say that, and they can affirm it with all of their calculations, and they've like been running
Mm.
these huge computer programs and compiling all the data sets, and this is what they've come to as conclusion with regard to. I'll
Yep.
send you. It's
Yeah.
Steve
Please do.
Torrance and Mark Kavanaugh and
Oh yeah. Uh huh.
a couple of other guys. But yeah, I'll send you their latest model. But before we run out of time, I wanted to ask you if you had chance to check out the latest, the total eclipse, and if you were at all in any of the area of totality, because it was only an hour away, an hour and so away from us, and we were able to catch it in totality, and it was an incredible, magnificent experience for us. But just wanted to ask you,
Well, I was up here in Michigan, so I was at 80 some percent or whatever. But I was
yeah,
out there taking taking footage, and I had my
hmm
solar film going and everything, and got some pretty good pictures. The main thing I came away from that is I'm doing a lot of. I've got a study about sun shrinkage. You've probably seen some of my videos on that, and I've got one video that's called 5 minutes of shrinking sun footage, and that's just basically plowing through every single sunset time lapse footage I can find on YouTube and then measuring if the sun shrinks at all as it's going down. And of course it does. I think there's only one video that it didn't. And you might say, well, why is there one video that doesn't? And then there's 100, or I don't know how many others there were that I found that it does. And the answer to that, I don't want to take too much time because we're running out of time, but the answer to that is because the sun shrinks at varying degrees. If you're in Tampa Bay, the video I have on Zeteticism.com called 5 minutes of shrinking sun footage, the first bit of footage in there is from Tampa Bay. And the sun shrinks dramatically. And that's why I have it as the first bit of footage, because the sun, it's, I couldn't believe it. It shrinks so much. It's got a nice clean edge. We know we're not looking at camera flare, glare, or whatever. And I always wondered why over Tampa Bay would it shrink so much? Because in Michigan, it shrinks much, much less. It does shrink, but it's much, much less. And that's taken me a long time to figure out, because I was in 2015 into 16, I was doing a lot of the shrinking sun footage videos. And then a lot of people were like Red's Rhetoric, and a lot of others were criticizing me, saying, you need to do your own footage, you need to have filters. And I'm like, okay, why not? Let's do filtered footage and everything. But when I did the filtered footage, I noticed that the sun shrinkage would be much, much less than places like the Tampa Bay footage. But the thing is, the Tampa Bay footage, the sun's going right over your head.
right, right.
But where I am up here in Michigan, it's on an arc. But we all know. So if I'm looking at it on an arc, the shrinkage is going to be much, much less. So I mean, it's taken me a long time to figure some of this stuff out. But the main thing I walked away from the eclipse footage was it's sort of because a lot of people said, you were. I came out with some shrinking sun footage, and I said I was going to come out with Zeteticism Volume 6 that was all about that, which is actually about half done, but it's just been kind of sitting there because I never knew if I've got real primitive. I'm trying to do shrinking sun filtered footage with very primitive equipment. In other words, with a $5 piece of solar film and an iPhone. Why do I want to do that? People have criticized me and saying, why don't you go buy a $100 camera and the right equipment? And my answer is because I want to be able to show this in a way that everybody can do it.
Everybody could do it, right? Yeah.
It only costs $4 to get use your glasses that you had for the solar eclipse, put it over your iPhone, and you can do it. You just download the free time lapse footage app to put on your iPhone, so it costs nothing. So I've been trying to figure out how to do that, and I was never sure. I came out with some initial shrinking sun footage videos, and then I took them down because people were saying that what I was measuring was sun glare decreasing as the sun lowers. How the sun gets so much dimmer. It's still way up in the sky, but it gets so dim.
hmm
Which is kind of curious. What's that fellow? There's that one fellow who says that sunlight sort of stops; it doesn't go infinitely. real well-known flat earther. His name slips in my mind. But anyways, kind of reminds me of what he's saying. But what I came away from, so I was never sure if I really was measuring camera glare or not. But when I used the same equipment and took the eclipse footage, man, it was real. It showed me that the equipment that I was using is measuring properly sun shrinkage, and I'm not measuring camera glare, because with this eclipse, I had a chunk out of the sun. I could measure I had a real nice clean shape of the sun. So I know that I'm not measuring camera glare and so forth, and that the equipment, just a primitive setup of an iPhone with a piece of $4 solar film, is properly measuring what the sun is doing without too much glare. Because if I had too much glare, I wouldn't get a nice, perfect picture of the eclipse happening with that primitive footage. So that's kind of revived my interest to finish that study in the shrinking sun footage with the primitive setup, showing everybody how to do it from their backyard and so forth. So that's I guess maybe that's not too enlightening, but that's the main thing I took away from it, from the eclipse. But I know there's been a flurry of activity about the eclipse. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, no, I think that's important because that is something that people ask about, being at different points. Again, we were talking about earlier about how the sun transits back and forth between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer. And I think that depending where the sun is in its movement between these 2 points, depending on what period of the year it is, that as it rises and as it sets, that we're going to get different amounts of shrinkage, and also as far as the size, the appearance of the size of the sun as it enters into our field of visibility, and as it leaves our field of visibility, that all of these things change according to that motion and that perspective. And so, yeah, we have to be able to explain and to help people to better understand these things in order to, help them to get on board with examining and looking and coming to realization on these things as well. And something as simple as that, it's important to give people explanations so that they could better understand what they themselves are observing in their part of the world, with their own perspective and their own, as far as what they see with their own eyes and so.
Yeah, that's flat Earth. That's it, right? Seeing with your own eyes. See, when you talk to the scientists, they'll say the Earth is a globe, but you can't prove it. You have to believe us.
Yeah,
now, the
right.
flat Earther can go and say, if we're both standing on the sidewalk, say you and me, Zen, are on the sidewalk, and we're talking to a flat Earther and we're talking to a professional academic heliocentrist. The flat Earther can say, standing on the sidewalk right here, I can prove the shape of the Earth. I can prove it with the way water, the reflection of sunlight off water. I can prove it with sundogs. I can prove it with blah, blah, blah. And what does the heliocentrist have? Nothing.
Right, exactly.
That's why when they first flew the thing around the Earth, supposedly the spaceship that was supposedly going around there, said, we now know the Earth isn't flat, because nobody had a clue. There were still flat Earthers all over the place and everything.
Right.
They had to make sure to instill us with this propaganda, this theoretical non-information.
Exactly. Right.
So that's what the flat Earther needs to do. I mean, in my opinion, people can do whatever they want, but in my opinion, we need to get away from anything theoretical. I know people say I take that overboard. It says on my YouTube channel, theory is the enemy of knowledge. That's like the subtitle of my YouTube channel. But I think that's important, because if you can go to someone and say, and point out as the sun is setting and saying, that structure of light coming from the sun all the way to the beach, not the fact that it comes from the sun all the way to the beach, because that can happen on a concave surface, but the shape of it, how it's thinnest out at the sun and then it spreads out as it gets closer to the beach, is impossible on a convex surface, on a globe surface. Right there, done. And you can then go over to a restaurant near the beach that you're at and take a glass and then put a lighter behind it and show the light reflecting from behind it, and you'll see the opposite shaped pattern happens over that convex surface. That's what flat earthers need to be doing right there, because then you'll get, of course, all these people, they don't care how much evidence they see, they're still going to believe a lie, but you're going to be able, you don't have to argue, you don't have to, pound your hand on the desk saying you must believe me. You can just show them the evidence, and certain amounts of people are going to believe, because it's fact.
Yeah. Well,
and it's beautiful.
Right, absolutely. And like the children, they can go outside, and if you never told them that the world was a globe, they would have never have ever come up with that themselves. I mean, even just
Yeah.
going to the beach and looking out over the wide expanse of the ocean spread from horizon to horizon, in the way that the property of water is to
Mhm.
collect in a level, the fact that we have sea level, worldwide sea level. I mean, all those things, in my opinion, again, are empirical
Mhm.
evidence, repeatable, observable. Anybody can do it, no matter where they are in the world. And yeah, those kind of things verify, affirm,
Mhm.
certainly that what we're talking about is truth. But yeah,
And it
brother.
all works because of gravity. They have this silly metaphysical idea
Right,
called gravity, and that's what allows them to say that everything, the whole, it's like their whole entire cosmological fiction, Big
right.
Bang and heliocentrism, is based on this metaphysical idea. Man, Zen, have you watched my video about when they supposedly discovered gravity waves? I don't know if you've ever seen
Oh,
that, but
uh, yeah, with
it's
that
kind of
machine.
funny.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
then
mean,
they came out later and even said that they had inserted the evidence and the as far as detecting the gravity waves. Did you hear about that as well?
yeah. Well,
Yeah, that is so crazy.
when I was making that video, the title of it is "Discovery of Gravity Waves as Non-Scientific Information and Media Circus."
Mhm.
I mean, I had to stop. The video is only like a half hour long. It's just me watching the press conference, giving comments, and I had to literally stop my recording several times because I was cracking up because it
Right,
was
right,
so funny.
right,
Because I mean, I can't believe that we've got PhDs all over the world watching this, thinking this is real. They're
right.
saying they know gravity waves are real because they hear a sound in a speaker. But
Mhm.
isn't I thought the space time is supposed to be metaphysical. It's supposed to be something that's not detectable. Yet they're saying they can hear it. I mean, it's just so unbelievably funny. Anyway, I was kind of happy with that video just because it sort of, without anybody knowing it, gave a whole bunch of humor to the whole
Right, yeah.
heliocentric model. I mean,
And
what a
we
joke.
gotta have humor, man, because it is so laughable. The insanity of their proposition and the things that they put forth as truth. It is so laughable now that we can understand and looking back at all of it. It's
Yes.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
But hey,
it
brother,
really
we've
is.
got like 3 minutes left. I want to give you a chance to give out all your website where people can go to support and find
Oh
your
yeah,
work,
yeah.
and then your websites, and we'll have final commentary.
Yeah. My ministry website, the one that I'm really hot on right now, is praiseandlove.net. I just put it. I'm putting up. I'm kind of really getting in the mode of that. I just put up a video the other day on how the surrendered Christian should be expecting to have daily confirmations and even almost hour to hour, minute to minute. Just it's almost like God is speaking to us through confirmations in our life and through
Always,
physical reality. It's just
yes,
amazing stuff. I
right.
mean, and so that's what I'm really hot on right now. But then my flat Earth site is firmamentofpower.net or Zeteticism.com and get you to the same
Mm-hmm.
place. And yeah, I hope to. I've got a bunch of like half done videos, and I hope to really crank some more stuff out in the future.
Right on. Yeah, the I in it's called in a book I don't remember. It's called The Knock of the Spirit, and how God is speaking to us all the time in a language that is largely ignored by the mainstream. That most people don't recognize that God is speaking to us on all levels, all ways. Through
Mm-hmm.
even His creation, and yet we don't recognize the metaphysical or the spiritual, the esoteric aspects of that language, and because of that, we largely miss that communication. And then most people are not
Yeah,
kingdom oriented or focused or prioritizing the kingdom, and so
it's
they miss
so
all that
important.
as well. Yeah.
So man, when I was a non-believer, I thought Christians were just kind of just talking to themselves when they prayed. I had no idea of the unbelievable two-way communication going on. And the more
Right.
surrendered,
Right.
the more hardcore you are with Christ, the more you put Him in number one in your life, the more you focus
Yes.
on Him in ceaseless prayer and ceaseless faith, the more
Yes.
it happens. And it just overtakes. But if anybody goes to my praiseandlove.net site, go all the way to the right on the top, see theology hash, open up that menu and go to epistemology, and it's that video you see right there called Reality is a Confirmation Stream from God to Surrendered Christian.
That's awesome, brother. It's so refreshing to speak to somebody like yourself that understands some of this other stuff that that I myself have also been led to discernment and truth upon, and which so many simply won't accept because they'll label it New Age or whatever. But yet, this is the mechanic, the dynamics of energy, and the way that the Most High has established the creation. You reap what you sow. What you pray on and what you intend is what you manifest, and that's just the way it is. It's not that it's New Age or Buddhist or whatever you want to label it. That's just the way that the creation works. And so, and you either manifest ignorantly and unconsciously, or you manifest consciously and with your prayer and with your intent. And why not do it in a way that is going to create beauty for yourself and for others, and quit creating the lessons of ignorance and a misery that so many people are habitually every day creating over and over for themselves. Change for the better. Takes the same amount of energy. But hey, brother, final comment from you.
Hey, if you want to know the truth, you want joy, follow Christ.
Amen, brother. Hey, we appreciate you, Jeffrey, and we'll talk again next Friday. Thanks for the time, brother.
Thank you.
Shalom. God bless all. Good night.